Are 50 million YouTube, Instagram, and Twitch creators the new founders? And are they more numerous and also more economically important than we've ever thought before? Welcome to Tech First with John Koetsier. There are now more than 50 million creators in the world on platforms like YouTube, Instagram, Twitch, TikTok, and others, of course. 2 million of them are professionals. They're earning a full-time living, and that number might be growing fast. To dive into this whole world of creators, we're chatting with Yuan, who is a senior associate at Signalfire. She recently released a massive report on the creator economy. Welcome.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having me. I'm YY at Signalfire, and we are a VC located in the Bay Area.
Wonderful. Glad to have you. You're located in the Bay Area, but you're in Seattle today at least. So happy to have you there. I'm in Vancouver. Awesome. Let's start here. You created a massive report on the creator economy. You did a market map, all that stuff. Let's start with what a creator is. What's that look like? What's that mean?
Yeah, totally. So a creator is, anyone who puts out content. So it's people like you, John, doing this right now, this moment. You are a creator. Anyone from people who write blog posts to posting photos on Instagram to streaming live on Twitch and more recently on TikTok. So
yes,
anyone who creates content.
Excellent. So a lot of people create content, but you've identified a couple different types, right? The pro and amateur. What separates those?
Yeah, so the pros are the ones who are able to do this for full time. And these are people who are making six-figure salaries by creating full-time. There's about 2 million of these people around the world, and the rest, the 48 million, are considered amateurs. And these are people, with say 1,000 followers here and there. They aren't able to do this full-time yet, but it's starting to become much bigger part of their kind of income streams.
Excellent. And I just brought up your report on screen right now, so you can see the 50 million and where they're spread. Looks like Instagram is pretty big for this, and YouTube is pretty big as well. Looks like one is more popular with amateurs and YouTube is more popular with pros.
Yeah, and we can say that it's probably a function of how long those platforms have been around. So YouTube is the first platform that came up. And it takes a while for creators to become professional because they need to accumulate their follower base. So as a function of just how long they've been on these platforms, a lot of them were able to go pro over time.
Right, right. Let's talk about this creator class because, of course, we've had, I guess, cultural discussions sometimes about influencers and what that looks like and how that works. And sometimes, I don't know, there's a Kardashian effect, and we think of people who are famous for being famous, or we think of people who say, "I want to be an influencer." In fact, you mentioned in one of our email preps for this, do you have a kid? Or are they on any of those platforms? Well, my daughter is actually, she tutors. And one of the kids she was tutoring said, "I don't need to learn this stuff because I'm going to be an influencer." And so it was math, right? And she said, "I don't need to learn this. I'm going to be an influencer." Talk about whether creators get enough respect and kind of what kind of economic contribution and cultural contribution they make.
Yeah, no, that's such a great point, because what's fascinating is when you look at surveys run on American teens, there's a lot more of teenagers today saying that they want to become a YouTube star than they want to become an astronaut. It's like 30% difference. And that job didn't exist 10 years ago. So what's fascinating is, these kids, what we call now Gen Z, is growing up thinking that this is a real and viable career option. And I think it's become more and more widely accepted because of the number of people who are able to make it big on these platforms. So, great example in the past year on TikTok is, Charlie, who, 16-year-old, rose to fame over a year, now has almost 90 million followers.
Wow.
And does these, these adorable dances, people call them. And her whole family's become influencers. Her sister, 19 years old, also is 30-something million followers, and her parents frequently appear on kind of guests. So I think teens look at that and say, that's a role model. That's someone who I can become, and it doesn't take a whole lot.
Hmm. It's very, very interesting. I mean, just culturally, if you think about the amount of content that we consume these days that isn't professionally created, that isn't created with a whole studio team and a writer and a script and all those other things, that's I don't know if there's a number for that. And I know it was beyond the scope of your report, but I'd be interested in knowing what that percentage might be.
Um, so the percentage, so to clarify, the percentage of people.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, like, of all the content we consume, whether that's video on YouTube or wherever it might be, stuff on Instagram, I'm wondering if anybody has a percentage for how much is actually creator driven versus corporately driven.
Gotcha. Well, if I were to take a wild guess, I don't have this data in my back pocket, but if I were to take a wild guess, depends on the generation. But for Gen Z, it's honestly probably 90%.
Wow.
Uh, for millennials like me, probably 70%. And then, towards the older generations, the baby boomers, I imagine it would be far less because traditional media and TV is still a big part of their lives. But, as we all familiar, the kind of, unplugging cable TV is a huge trend. And I think it's only going to continue as
Why,
it
that's
and
really, really interesting. Because that rings true, actually. I have a 17-year-old son, and he'll watch YouTube or other things on his laptop or on his phone instead of coming down and watching maybe MLB or NHL hockey or something like
yeah.
that, right? And so he's watching that stuff that's created by an individual creator. That's pretty amazing. Now, you looked at 3 layers of the creator economy. What are those 3 layers?
Yeah, so the 3 layers are layer one, the birth of the media platforms. So we just talked about, YouTube, Instagram, Twitch, etc. And that started about 10 years ago. Layer two is the kind of the influencer marketing landscape. So the platforms that connects influencers with brands and agencies that also exist to service this role. And then layer three is, and the most exciting one is the one where we're in the very early innings of, and that is a layer where companies are built to treat creators as founders, treating them as SMBs and giving them the tools and infrastructure to succeed, not just with creating content, but with also building out their business.
Very, very interesting. Situate this for us a little bit historically, because we've gone through periods of history where most people work for themselves, right? Maybe that was a little farm or something like that, whatever it might be, a rural time frame, maybe in the 1800s or something like that in North America, right? We've also gone through times when most people worked for somebody else, right? And whether that was honestly more of a serf model or whether that's an employee model, you worked for somebody else, right? What's this mean historically to have this emergence of this creator economy and this person, this class of people who create stuff for all of us?
Yeah. So if you look back in history, and I'm a huge, history buff, if you look at past like post-industrial revolution, right? It's created all these massive companies, manufacturing, agriculture, and like you said, we had this wave of 200 years where pretty much everyone is employed by an employer. But it's only until the last 10 years, after the birth of these media platforms like YouTube, Snapchat, Twitch, Instagram, etc., that has given rise to this new sentiment of I am going to be kind of in control of my own destiny, and I want to work for myself. I do not want to sit in an office. And you're able to do that because the barrier to entry is so low. All you need, is a smartphone, which everyone has, a camera on it, your bright spirits, and just your creativity, and that's pretty much it.
The really interesting thing for me is that there's been an explosion of what you can be great at. You can be great at mimicking the president on TikTok and Instagram, and you can get famous and you can make a career out of that. You can get famous at inventing a cool new dance to some odd music that nobody's ever heard before from a different country. And you can make a career of that. There's so many new niches. You called them creators rather than influencers, which has been kind of the historical term that's risen. Why did you choose to do that?
Yeah, I wanted to call them creators because I think influencers come with this this connotation that all you're doing is trying to have a follower base and to be able to promote that, right? I think the idea of a creator is someone doing this, whatever they're creating, for the sole purpose of expressing themselves. They are their own artists in whatever shape and form, and that's the main reason why they're creating. Is not to really kind of have a mass following and then lead them to all sorts of places, but to express their individuality. And then people will come to you because they like your personality, whichever, kind of shape or form that takes.
Getting those in the right order is really, really challenging.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody wants the end goal. Very few people want to start at the hard first part of that. But I also want to talk about monetization, because you mentioned 2 million people are doing this full time. They're making a full time living here, and some are very, very successful, and some are covering the bills and moving forward. It started with ads, and hence the kind of influencer model, right? We've seen a patronage model, kind of almost harking back to medieval times when you had a patron for an artist, right? And so we've got Patreon and other platforms like that. We've also got people who have become a brand essentially and are selling branded merchandise. Walk us through kind of the spectrum of monetization for the creator economy.
Yeah. So when you look at the past 10 years of the creator economy, the first layer of that, as you said, was through advertisements. So if you're a YouTuber, you get paid on your share of revenue from viewership on your videos. And then we had the rise of influencer marketing. So brands came to these massive creators and said, wow, you have like several million followers. Let me pay you to advertise, sponsor my product. And then there were affiliate links. And then I would say, because that long tail of creators have grown to 50 million, such a large size, the number of brand sponsorships per each person is now spread very thin, right? So only the top creators are able to really get these brand deals. And then you leave the long tail of others out there without much business to do. So that's why we now see the rise of patronage models like Patreon, and there's some other ones like Ko-fi and Buy Me a Coffee that are a little bit more easier to get started with, $5, a person, that kind of thing. But also trying to sell other things to help creators monetize. So it can be anything from selling merchandise, like you said, selling courses, selling webinars, podcasts, selling content like newsletter, and just trying to be able to help the creators do what they love the most, which at the end of the day is to still create and monetize their creation. So those kind of products help provide value to both the consumer, their fans who are consuming the content, but also help generate additional income for the creators themselves.
It's really interesting because if you look at the ones who are super successful, so you look at maybe Dude Perfect on YouTube or something like that, right?
Yeah.
They're a brand. They do tons of brand integrations with other brands. I think they're at, I totally guessing. I think they're somewhere in 50 million subscribers right now, probably north of that. They travel and do actual live shows. You can buy T-shirts with the Dude Perfect logo, which is pretty cool on it. You can get all kinds of things, and of course, there's on-platform monetization. Not to mention, there's ads obviously on YouTube, but also you can buy premium subscriptions to YouTube to their content as well. So it's kind of getting all over for how they can monetize it. It's super interesting. What we've seen with the internet over the past 2 decades is that media kind of exploded, and now we're kind of seeing stars explode. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it's internet really is like it's a megaphone, right? It's the one thing it does, it helps you kind of distribute your content to infinite number of people out there.
Yes.
And I think that trend has been accelerated by the mobile phone, with kind of everyone a smartphone in their hands. It's just so easy to get onto any of these platforms, download the app and start watching and viewing. And it's so easy to get addicted on TikTok, just scrolling 30-second, bite-sized content. And I think because of the really frictionless ways of how everyone can get involved in a creator economy, it really has helped these stars, these creators, get their name like across and become viral.
And it's really niched out who is a star. I mean, that always was the case, right? I mean, you had soccer stars or football stars, or you had maybe author stars, or different things like that. So you had it in your niche. But now, I mean, some of the people that maybe my son will come up to you and say, "This is so awesome," and this is so. And he'll mention a name. I'll go like, "Who's that?"
That, yeah.
That person. How stupid are you? It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's the thing. I personally feel old too, and the teenagers that I come across in my life tell me about this and that, and I'm constantly like trying to play catch up and Google their names, and like, wow, my BC job.
Google is essential to know all the stars these days. Okay, how many Twitter followers? How many YouTube subscriptions? Okay, I guess there's somebody. Okay, good.
Yeah, no, and for teenagers, they trade notes, right? That's what they talk about.
Yes.
It's no longer talking about TV shows that are like How I Met Your Mother. That's not the topic du jour these days, right? It's about which TikTok star is trending.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if you are Gen Z and you live in that environment, you are bound to know who's who and who's trending in this industry.
Exactly. Let's turn our eyes towards the future. Obviously, you're in the VC business. You're about basically making bets on the future and knowing what goes on, what's going to happen, and what's going to be big some years from now. Where do you see this in 5 years, 10 years? Where do you see the 50 million going to, of the wider universe? And where do you see the 2 million going to of the full-time creators?
Yeah, so I will begin by saying that, this is my opinion. I do not have a crystal ball, but I will try to, make the best kind of estimate I possibly can in terms of the future, right? So I think that in the next 5 to 10 years, several things will happen. Number one, the number of those long tail amateur influencers, creators, is going to explode. I think by our data, this should grow from 50 million to 100 million and possibly even larger.
Wow.
And then two, I think a large amount of that growth is going to be driven by Gen Z because of several attributes of that generation. So Gen Z is known to be extremely individualistic. They really care about owning their own personalities and not really caring about fitting in. And two is they're more likely to have a side hustle than any other generation, just because they're starting something in a mobile app. So you see Gen Zs trading secondhand sneakers, secondhand merchandise all the time. And three, Gen Z is a generation that is just super, super plugged in. They're on multiple platforms. They have friends all over the world, and they're not afraid to, get into any of these circles. So a lot of that kind of 50 million creator group trending to 100 million is going to be driven by that generation. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing we're going to see is I spent a lot of time thinking about what's happening in Asia. I think when we look at the world and the creator economies in different countries, Asia is actually quite far ahead, more so than the US. And it's probably driven by, the billion plus consumers in Asia. But when you look at Asia, the biggest trend that has been dominating the creator economy there is e-commerce. Yeah. So live streaming times e-commerce. And we don't really have that yet in the US, but I suspect that in the next 5 to 10 years, there will be platforms that emerge that helps creators monetize in yet another format, which is, selling merchandise, but selling them live. And I think we're going to see people purchasing items not because they're searching for it, but because they're discovering it from their favorite influencer. So I think e-commerce is going to shift from search to discovery. And a large amount of that is going to be driven by these influencers.
I find that really interesting too. And I started learning about that about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago. And it's like the whole in China, especially the influencers who are live streaming with a variety of products. And it's like the home shopping network times a million.
Right.
And it's interesting because it makes, sure, there's a commercial relationship, obviously, but it makes commerce kind of personal, and something that you bought might mean something more to you because you bought it from somebody that you care about, that you follow, that you adore, that is a star to you in some way, shape, or form, right? And that's very, very interesting. We don't really have that over here in North America or in Europe. It'll be very interesting to see if we do get there and what that'll look like. Very, very interesting stuff. Wow, I want to thank you for your time. This has been super interesting. It's a super topical thing, and I am a creator as well
Yeah,
in a lot of ways, and many of us are. And thank you for your time.
absolutely. Thank you for having me, John. This was super fun.
Excellent. For everybody else, thank you for joining us on Tech First. My name is John Koetsier. I really appreciate you being along for the ride. You'll be able to get a full transcript of this at johnkoetsier.com within a couple of days, maybe a week, and the story will come up at Forbes as well. The full video is always available on YouTube. Thank you for joining. Hey, maybe share with a friend. Until next time, this is John Koetsier with Tech First.